to become a Daily Wire subscriber. So go check that out right now. And we also have a lot of sales over at the Daily Wire shop. We have cyber deals that are live right now. It's like 70% off all of the conservative gifts for everyone on your wish list. So if you wish to either torture a lib in your family or you wish to help a conservative in your family, then you should go check that out right now. They've got the Golden Leftist Tears tumbler, and they've got the collected poems of Donald J. Trump. That is a real thing that exists in the world, and it actually is really, really, really funny. And they've got the T-shirts and the hoodies and all sorts of other stuff. So go check them out right now at dailywire.com/shop. And again, make sure that you actually subscribe, because when you subscribe, then you get all the goodies that we have. So much good stuff coming next year. Like, I can't even begin to describe all the good stuff that we have coming next year. Truly, like, it's kind of amazing.
No, I think we need to restore a little balance, Ben. I think we need to restore a little balance to this show if you tell us about balance of nature.
I was gonna do that. That was gonna be my transition.
Let me try that again. Hold on. Let me try it again. Take two. Don't cut this. This is good stuff. Hey, Matt, I think we need to restore a little balance to our show. If you could tell us.
I was gonna say the bit about the balance. Whatever, it's fine. Let's talk about balance of nature. You know, their ingredients are 100% whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. You can experience for yourself, as I have, the original balance of color, taste, and smell. Their fruits and vegetable supplements include 31 colorful ingredients of 16 whole fruits and 15 whole vegetables. Ingredients include mango, pineapple, wild blueberries, banana, shiitake mushrooms, wheatgrass, spinach, kale, cayenne pepper, broccoli. And the fiber and spice supplement features stuff that I can't pronounce, but psyllium husk is what you get. It's important to get the psyllium. I don't know what that is, but I see that and I just feel like I need to have more psyllium husk in my life. Flaxseed, whole apple, and monk fruit. It also includes 12 aromatic spices such as cinnamon, turmeric, and cardamom. I actually take the Balance of Nature supplements. It's one of the only things I do for my health. I never go to a doctor. I refuse to. I pulled my hamstring over Thanksgiving break playing pickup football with my kids outside. I'm crippled. I refuse to go to a doctor for that. My wife keeps saying, why don't you go to a doctor? You can barely walk. I say, the doctor's not going to do anything for me. What am I going to get an MRI? I got to be in that tube. It's kind of weird and claustrophobic. Anyway, I won't do any of that, but I will take Balance of Nature, which you should as well. Plus, they're launching a fantastic new product. Balance of Nature's freeze-dried snacks are 100% real fruit, bananas, mangoes, pineapple, and strawberries, freeze-dried to lock in flavor and give that perfect crunch. Go to balanceofnature.com and get a free variety snack pack plus a free preferred customer membership with your first set of Balance of Nature supplements. Go to balanceofnature.com to claim this limited time offer before it ends.
Speaking of food, Matt, you focused on the real issues while we were all stuffing ourselves over Thanksgiving, and you talked about why restaurants suck now. And I didn't catch it, and I want to hear it.
Well, you haven't caught a single piece of content I've ever put out since I've been
including
here.
Stuff we've done together.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah. So over the Thanksgiving break, we put up a video. I told my team I want to do. And maybe there was some skepticism, or I don't know, because it's one of those topics you don't know exactly how much it'll resonate. But I have this impression, and I think a lot of people have it, that everything sucks now. The quality of everything has gone down, and that's especially the case with food. And I was thinking about this the other day because we ordered pizza, and all these. I can remember when I was a kid that you'd order a pizza and you could pretty much order a pizza from almost anywhere and it was pretty good. And not only was it pretty good, but it was different. Like you could get a pizza from Domino's and that was one thing, or go to Papa John's. It was like a very different flavor. It was a different kind of pizza. You could go to Pizza Hut. You could even go inside Pizza Hut. They had a salad bar. You'd sit down. It was a whole thing. With my family, we very rarely ordered out because we have a million kids in the family, and going to Pizza Hut was like put on your Sunday's best and go to Pizza Hut. It was a night on the town. It was a lot of fun, and the pizza was great. And now you order from these places, and there are two things you notice. Number one, it all tastes exactly the same, and it's all terrible. It's like cardboard with ketchup smeared on it, put in a microwave. That's what all pizza tastes like. And you go to these chain restaurants, and I haven't been to a chain restaurant in a little bit. We took our kids to, well, I guess I won't say we went to Outback. And we sat down. It was like inedible. I actually could not finish it. It was salty.
Did you get the bloomin' onion?
And Yeah, I got that I could finish, but I didn't. I finished it. I didn't enjoy it though. I hated myself the whole time. And then we got the rest of the food. It was like everything is really salty and it tastes bad, and that's the case with most of these chain restaurants. So this is what I've perceived. I did a little video on it.
Is there a theory attached to this, or is it just to be an old?
Well,
this just you being an old person bitching?
This
exactly.
Is
like this is just
there
like
is a theory. There's a
you
theory,
realizing that when you were 8 years old, everything tasted great, including some of the trashiest food on earth.
There is a theory. So this is what I'm saying. I said I want to look into this. Like, this is the impression I have, is that the quality has gone down. Is it just nostalgia, or is there something real that's actually happening here? And there is something real. So quality has dropped, and I think it's across the board with many things in American life. But just focusing on food for a moment, it has gone down because a few things have happened as I researched this. Number one, a lot of these restaurants have been taken over by these private equity companies that come in, and this has happened especially over the last 20 or 25 years, where most of these places are not owned; they're owned by the private equity firms. And then part of that is that now they come in. It's like we got to cut costs, and so they go to these big distributors like Cisco. And so it's all the same food. Like there's 80% of these places, they're ordering the food from the same place. Everything is frozen. None of it is fresh anymore. And it wasn't always that way. And it is now. The quality's gone down. And then the third part of it is that none of the people involved, from like the person behind the cash register all the way up to the people that own the places now, none of them actually care about the quality of the food. It doesn't matter to them. There's no one involved who has any passion about the quality of the stuff that they're giving you. They're just there for the profit, or they're there for it because it's a job. And so if you complain about the quality, there's no one to even complain to, because no one cares. No one that you're talking to cares about it. And so this is a real thing.
So how did that part change? The food part is okay. I see they changed their supply chains or whatever. What happened with the employees?
Well, I think part of it is that if you go back again 20 years ago, a lot of these places, they were employing like high school students. That's how I worked at a pizza place when I was in high school.
Subway sandwich artists.
And that's happening less and less now. Now you've got also the numbers of people who work in these industries now who have like substance abuse problems, who are older with substance abuse problems. That's gone up considerably as well. So, but also if you're working for one of these, and look, I'm as capitalist as the next guy, but you're working for one of these places that's owned by some conglomerate or owned by a private equity firm, it's like you don't feel a tie to it anymore. You don't really care that much about the product. And as I said, the people that own the place don't care about it.
I actually think it's not even. I think that it's corporate versus not corporate. I think it's family versus corporate. Meaning, so most people who start restaurants, right, like small restaurants, it's usually like you and your family members. So I was making, we were talking about whether we should do this topic earlier, and I was kind of making fun of you guys because I was saying in the kosher community, like I eat kosher, so I'm coming from a different context from you guys. Like the last time I ate at a chain restaurant, like a normal not kosher chain restaurant, I was 11 years old and it was Kentucky Fried Chicken. So it's been 30 years for me, and like they have some chain restaurants in Israel, and they are similarly not as good, but they're certainly better, I think, than the ones that are in the United States. In the kosher community, every single restaurant is a family-owned restaurant. Even the family-owned restaurants that have like 3 or 4 different restaurants, that's like the extent of it. There's no such thing as a kosher chain restaurant because there are like 8 of us in the United States. And so what that means is that the restaurant quality has actually gotten better and better and better since I was a kid, because you're getting people who are aging into more income, and as they age into more income, they can spend more of their income on these restaurants, and the community isn't big enough to support a gigantic like chain of hamburger restaurants. And so instead what you get are like really good, excellent kind of locally sourced dishes where the family owns it. And because that's, I think everybody and you guys have big families. I've got a big family. And so everybody has the aunt who's like, she's a really good cook. She should really start a restaurant. Somebody should actually start. And then it turns out that restaurant is like the hardest business to succeed in, that they go bankrupt at an extraordinary rate. And so what that means is that particularly if you are a person who's trying to just keep your restaurant open, you got to work your ass off, right? You got to love doing it. You got to love the food. You got to bring your 14-year-old in from middle school to like get behind the counter and really work. I spent my entire life in restaurants, by the way. Like my dad worked at a restaurant my entire childhood. He played the piano at a restaurant. And so I was like in the kitchen with the waiters and like hanging out with the bartenders for fully 10 years of my life, 15 years of my life when I was a kid. So I love these restaurants. I'm big into kind of the local restaurants. And I will say that when it comes to kind of chain product, the people who get into the McDonald's business are there to make money. They're not there because they want to make a great burger. The people who want to make a great burger are starting their own kind of local their own local shop. So I actually think there is something to that, and I do think that you can feel it in the food.
Can
for
I
sure.
please interject some facts into this, because you're both
No.
speaking in generalities and you're just missing it, okay? And I don't know how. I've been a little open about this, but I'm a pretty heavy user of fast food. I get a Mac attack pretty regularly, and I can tell you with certain. I'll just go down the list. KFC has gotten worse in the last 25 years. There's no doubt about that. Domino's, on the other hand, has gotten better in the last 25 years. McDonald's has gotten much
nonsense.
better. I don't even want to eat McDonald's. The fries used to be better, sure. Now they use fresh beef for the double quarter pounder with cheese, or for the regular quarter pounder. It's much better. Arby's was awesome, got really bad, is much better now. The double beef and cheddar was an absolute. It was a revelation. Texas Roadhouse, as good as it's ever been. Cracker Barrel, the food's a little sloppier now, but the service is still great. Outback, I grant you, is not really kept up with the times. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Hardee's got worse, and Carl's Jr. got worse after Andy Puzder left. So, look, there are particularities here, but I think, Matt, you're feeling a little bit of nostalgia for your childhood, because I grew up in New York. So my friends who grew up in the middle of the country or in the South or even a little bit on the West Coast, they did not have. Look, I had nice actual family restaurants growing up that were casual, that were cheap, but they were very, very good. And so I wasn't yeah, I do the Applebee's every now and again. Yeah, I do the Outback every now and again. But if you look at the actual, like, not chain restaurants, I think they've gotten generally much better, with one exception, which is that hipsters made the plates get much smaller. They inserted like a bunch of dumb like adjectives into it, like activated Brussels sprouts. But otherwise, I actually think this is the one area where I'd say things have gotten noticeably better.
With
and
chain restaurants?
I basically call you all ignorant on your use of fast food.
First
And I
of
think the
Michael,
years,
hang on a second, Michael. So you said you're gonna inject facts, and then all you did was just arbitrarily go down a list of which restaurants you personally prefer more. I'm the one injecting facts in the discussion. I'm telling you that there is a number of actual significant changes that have factually occurred. One of them is that these places, most of them, do not use fresh food anymore, and they used to. Like, most of these restaurants used to use fresh food, and now they don't. Now they're getting the same frozen food off the back of the same
Wendy's,
truck.
always fresh, never frozen. McDonald's used to be frozen, now fresh. You think you're injecting
that's an
facts?
exception.
I'm injecting facts.
God, the level
into
of
this
passion,
conversation.
Michael, that you have for this is, man. I never say you're big on the Aquinas, but I think that your actual area of specialty and interest lies in fast food.
I'm a secret
it's-
fat guy.
Look, first of all, I'm not disagreeing. I actually think that McDonald's, of all the fast food options, gets a bad rap, but it is like
Burger King is like a homeless shelter now.
Yeah,
that one got much worse.
McDonald's is pretty consistent. If you want fast food, you should just go to McDonald's. It has, by far and away, if you want a fast food breakfast, you're not going to get better than McDonald's. I'll 100% agree with you there.
either.
It's like Five Guys is great, but guess what? It's fresh. They actually use fresh
You
ingredients.
also have to
Nothing
take
is
out a
frozen.
second mortgage to get Five Guys. I mean,
Well, I know,
Five
but
Guys-
they don't, but that's what you got to pay, because it's actually fresh. They don't have a freezer in the place. You're getting fresh ingredients. What you pick up when you go to like Applebee's or Chili's, the food, it's literally the same food. The Cisco truck goes with the frozen food to Applebee's, and then it goes across the shopping center to Chili's and unloads the same damn food that then's put in a microwave and served to you with a 6,000% markup. Okay, it's a scam, is what I'm telling you.
But what
And this
did
matters.
Chili's replace?
This is quality of
This
life.
is
What?
it. They accuse us. They say, conservatives, we're just conserving the liberalism of 15 years ago or whatever. This is a good example of that. When Chili's came, I'm not just blaming Chili's. I actually never get that into Chili's. But when Chili's and the similar restaurants came in, they displaced old, like, mom and pop diner type things. And there were all sorts of reasons. One of my favorite diners growing up constantly was failing health inspections. It was gross, like getting people sick, but I loved it. It was good. And so I think, all right, now if the chains are being bought up by private equity faceless corporations and they're all no good anymore, does this offer an opportunity? Am I being too hopeful? Does this offer an opportunity for more rancid mom and pop diners to fail their health inspections and delight customers like me?
Well, maybe, but the problem is, I mean, you just point out, like, Five Guys obviously is not a mom and pop place, but it's expensive. Like, when everyone is going the frozen food route and they're getting the same, they're wholesale frozen food and everything, put it in a microwave, and then you come in and say, I want to do fresh food, you're gonna have to charge a lot more, and then that's up to the consumer to choose the more expensive thing. which unfortunately most consumers won't. I mean, and that's what it comes down to. And I also think the fact, I mean, like we said before, the fact that one of the biggest differences is that you're dealing with people who don't care anymore. I just thought this is not food, but I had a problem with Wi-Fi, and I had to call the internet company. And it's like one of those things where, you have to make this phone call. You're going to be on the phone for 7 hours of your day, and you got to go through all the automated messages. Yep. Finally, you get to talk to a person. I talked to like 10 different people, and I'm aware of the fact while I'm talking to all these people that nobody I'm talking about gives the slightest shit about the problem that I'm having. None of them care at all, even a little bit. And there's no incentive for them to solve my problem. It does, whether my problem is solved or not means nothing to them. They don't benefit from it being solved. It doesn't hurt them if it isn't solved. And so it's this utterly hopeless feeling you have while you're on the phone shouting at some person in India who doesn't care at all. Oh, you're like, I need Wi-Fi. My family's coming over. They need to be able to watch TV. We want to put a football game on. And you're talking to someone who doesn't even know what American football is. Okay, and this is everywhere you go now.
Matt, I'm just telling you, we're going to fast forward 20 years, and it's just going to be Matt Walsh's show will just be called Old Man Yells at Clouds. I mean, my God,
that's
dude.
The show now. What are you talking about? 20 years.
I know you're not old enough, so now it's middle-aged man yells at clouds. But one aspect of this that may be worth asking is when we were all growing up. Maybe it's because none of us, I think, grew up rich. Going out to dinner was like a big deal. Right, like going out to dinner was like a super big deal. There were 4 kids in my family. You really didn't go out to dinner unless there was a special occasion in some way. You didn't just go out casually to dinner. And I feel like people just go out to dinner much more or order in much more. And so it's possible that the market has decreased in value in terms of like what people are paying for their dinner just because people are ordering in more. Like everything when I was growing up was home cooked, like everything. And I think that more and more people have accessed eating out or shipping food in as a normal mode of eating, and that means the prices have to go down because otherwise you just can't afford it. If you're a family that has a couple of kids and you're bringing in restaurant food every night, it can't be really, really good restaurant food every night or you're going to be poor. And so I assume that's why all these big chain stores continue to churn out not very good food but make decent money off it because people are just too lazy to actually home cook or they don't feel like home cooking. I mean, I would imagine that if you check the stats here, and we'll have to check it now, that people are eating significantly more takeout food than they were when we were growing up.
The salient point of Matt's rant, I think, other than his, absolute calumny against fast food restaurants, which have got compared to fast casual. The really salient point is the feeling that this happened to me at a Burger King the other day, which again is not just like a homeless shelter, but is a literal homeless shelter in most cases. I went up, I was standing there and wanted to order a Whopper, and there were 2 women behind the counter, and one employee had just gotten off, and no one would take my order, and the employee who had just gotten off was laughing at me. He was laughing at me that no one would take my order. They didn't care. I got a sandwich somewhere else. I'm reminded of Barry Goldwater in his book Conscience of a Conservative, ghostwritten by Brent Bozell, who said, we conservatives, we're not just against big monopolistic government. We're against monopolies in all of their forms because they're not as responsive, and that kind of power can take away our rights as well. So I agree. We need a political missile, a legislative missile perhaps, to fix that problem. And we have literal missiles that are currently blowing up Venezuelan narco-terrorists by our Secretary of War. Now, some people, mostly on the left, but a little bit in the Republican Party, are accusing the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, of committing war crimes by taking out the narco-terrorists. Before I get the educated opinion of a Harvard lawyer, Matt, I think this is totally fine and awesome. What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, please kill more. I think here's what I'll say: blowing up a boat full of narco terrorists who are bringing poison into America and are part of a $1 billion criminal enterprise that is responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans over the past decades. Doing that is more defensible, I think, legally, but certainly morally, than anything the United States of America has ever done in the Middle East. Like ever, which is also why it's funny to have someone like Mark Kelly out there complaining about this when this again is more defensible than anything that he did when he was in the Middle East. So when he was part of the Navy, I think he was talking about, he was on MSNBC, I think, or CNN, one of the two, talking about when he was in the Navy, well, they blew up. He was responsible for blowing up some Iraqi ships, but that was okay, he said, because they were he was trying to kick them out of Kuwait, and so it was a good reason. It was a good reason to blow up the Iraqi ships to keep them out of Kuwait. Well, okay, so that's okay to keep the Iraq out of Kuwait, so we could blow up ships, but to keep poison out of America that's killing actual Americans, that's a problem. To me, it's like very clearly this is where the United States military should be most activated, is in defending our actual homeland, like our actual physical country, from things that are actually hurting and killing Americans directly. And once we've done that, then we could talk about the stuff that's happening thousands of miles away. But this, to me, is just
now
pretty obvious.
The alleged war crime was, according to reporting, so take it with a grain of salt. But they said there was an oral order, not a written order, but an oral order from the Secretary of War to kill them all. To not like go and try to arrest them or give them a tour.
That's what you do. That's what you do with a missile. I don't know that it's true that he said to kill the survivors in the water.
Yeah, I see. No, he denies it. The White House denies it.
But even if he did, but so what? I mean, you hit the boat with a missile. Obviously, you tried to kill everybody. So what if some of them survive? You're just to be a good sport. You're supposed to send a rescue boat out to rescue them. The whole point, I'm pretty sure the point was not like a practical joke or a fun prank. The point was to actually kill the people on the boat. If any are alive, then of course you kill them too. It's like if you blow up a building, do you have to have firefighters on standby to put out the fire and rescue anyone who happens to be inside the building? The whole point was to kill the people inside it, I would think. And assuming those people are actual terrorists who want to kill Americans, then it's totally legitimate.
That's the Matt Walsh addendum to the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, exactly.
Ben, was it count or what?
Here's where it gets a little dicey. So there's the moral question of whether we should blow up drug boats, and the answer, of course, is we should blow up as many drug boats as humanly possible. Like that is an affirmative good for us to blow up drug boats with Hellfire missiles. Very much pro. Then there is the legal question. There are really two legal questions here. One is whether you need some sort of authorization from Congress to continue to blow up drug boats in the Caribbean when they're not like directly off of America's shores and they're international waters and all the rest of this sort of thing. That's sort of question number one. I'm of the legal opinion that you can totally blow up those drug ships, and that seems to be fairly well predicated at the very least. And then there's the secondary question, which came up because of this Washington Post story. Under American domestic law, you're really not supposed to be killing people who are deemed to be out of combat, right? That's the actual legal terminology. So, for example, if you're on a battlefield anywhere in the world and you shoot somebody and you've incapacitated them, they're unconscious on the battlefield, you're not allowed to walk up to them while they're unconscious on the battlefield and put two in their head. Right? It's just not something that you're supposed to do because they've been rendered non-threatening. And so now there's kind of a debate over whether the boat was completely destroyed or whether it theoretically could have been salvaged, whether they had the ability to call up their other drug trafficking friends and have them come out and pick them up. That was kind of the best defense that I saw of this order if it was given. I find it kind of hard to believe, just on the merits, that Pete Hegseth would say kill everybody and nobody in the military line of command would say, okay, I just need some clarifications. You mean that we're supposed to, just kill floating bodies in the water? Or what are we talking about here? And to me, a lot of this report, something smells about this. Here's what smells about this. It feels like a coordinated op. And what I mean by that is that the Democrats started with this. You're not allowed to follow illegal order stuff last week, right? They put out this video the end of the week before last, in which a bunch of Democratic congresspeople and senators said, if you're a member of the military, we're telling you, you're not allowed to follow an illegal order. And everybody went, what illegal orders are you talking about, right? You should actually name the order, because it actually is pretty counterproductive. If the idea is that we're only going to find out whether an order was illegal in your view when you gain power, how does anybody ever carry out an order at all, right? Yeah. Because it could be a Democrat gets elected 2-3 years from now and then turns around and says, oh, by the way, every order that you carried out for the last 10 years was illegal. All of you are going to jail. And so what you're really doing is creating a sort of bizarre Ferguson effect for the military, where you remember by the police, the idea was that if you enforce the law, you might go to jail. So the police stopped enforcing the law. So are Democrats trying to tell members of the military that if they don't want to go to jail, they need to not actually do the thing they're supposed to do, which is carry out the orders of the commander in chief? It feels coordinated because they released that video, and within a week and a half, there's a story in the Washington Post about Pete Hegseth issuing a quote unquote illegal order to, blow people out of the water. The whole thing kind of stinks to me as a general matter. Do I think that it's illegal? Again, we'll have to see what the fact pattern is. This is where Congress has Article 1 authority to actually investigate and determine who said what and when. Our sponsor, Kalshi, shows prediction markets regarding, for example, which cabinet member is most likely to go. Pete Hegseth right now, 29%. But, the reality is that I think this is a tempest in a teapot. And it also, on the other hand, kind of feels like that time when Trump deported a wife abuser, and then the entire left was like, how dare he violate the law by deporting the wife abuser? And, I just don't think that plays politically. How dare you kill the narco traffickers who are trying to murder Americans with fentanyl? Doesn't seem to have, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a political winner to me.
Walter Kern, I thought, had a really good take on this. He said he thinks that maybe the war on drugs failed. And now, I don't think the war on drugs failed. I think it actually was quite successful for a time, and the history has been rewritten. However, he says if it failed, he thinks it failed because people, they're not used to seeing it like an actual war. In this case, we are fighting the war on drugs as very closely like a war. Where it gets really weird to me, though, is even in international law, which a lot of conservatives say is just bunk anyway. But if you grant some legitimacy to international law, we're not signatories to the Rome Statute, so the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction here. We recognize a convention, but then you ask, okay, what's the point of the Geneva Convention? The Geneva Convention exists in large part to protect civilians in times of war. And so part of that is, if you play by the rules of war, then you can have certain privileges. And if you don't, like if you're a terrorist and you target civilians and you act outside the norms of war, you don't really get those privileges. Mark Thiessen years ago made the great point that if you extend Geneva Convention protections to terrorists, you actually totally undermine the Geneva Convention protections. So I think that's kind of interesting. Though even for terrorists, I guess you're supposed to afford them some basic, privileges, notably not killing them if they're out of combat. And then to your point, Ben, on U.S. domestic policy, you have the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which says, okay, U.S. troops are not allowed to do X, Y, and Z. What's very interesting about this, though, is it would not really apply, in my understanding, to the Secretary of War, because the Secretary of War is not one of the troops. He's a civilian who is in charge of that department. And so it's all very, very murky to me. And then I think, okay, well, let's get down to the brass tacks of it all. These are foreign terrorist organizations, formally declared so. They're shipping poison into our country, killing 75,000 Americans a year. We have exercised control over the Western Hemisphere for over 200 years. And now the Democrats are on the side. First, they were on the side of the wife beater who got deported because he was an illegal alien, maybe a gangster. And now they're on the side of the narco terrorists. Is this really going to play well in the midterms or in 2028?
Right. I think that's the big issue, I think, for the Democrats politically here is they keep glomming on to what they think are temporary wins that end up being long-term losses because they're so into the idea that, oh my gosh, we got them on procedural tic-tac-fell. And because we got them on a ticky-tack-fell, the American people are going to be really, really upset with Trump. Name the American who's truly upset with Donald Trump for blowing narco traffickers out of the water. I cannot imagine who those people are unless, they went to Berkeley. That's pretty much like the entire constituency for that argument. It does raise, one other question, which is it looks very much as though the Trump administration is trying to force Maduro out in Venezuela. And I'm kind of for it. I mean, I think that if we can do it without very much cost, low blood and treasure, not a lot, no boots on the ground or not a lot of boots on the ground, good things happening with very little cost is my game. I kind of enjoy it. I think it's a good thing. I really hope, let's put it this way. I hope that the CIA really does have somebody inside the Venezuelan government who's ready to push Maduro off the cliff here. Because if not, then this is an awful lot of resource expenditure for very little payoff in the end. And typically, if you're talking about a coup in Latin or South America, you have to have somebody inside the army or at least elites inside the kind of top echelon who are willing to push the guy out. Otherwise, Maduro's just going to sit there and be okay.
Yeah, Americans are sick of regime change, certainly in the Middle East. It's a little different in Latin America because we've been doing that for a very, very long time, and it's closer to our interests. Matt, I don't know, where do you fall on this? Are you ready for a regime change in Latin America?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm always skeptical of regime change. I kind of agree with you that if it's closer to home, you can make a better argument for it actually advancing American interests. And when I say American interests, I mean the interests of actual Americans, like American families. Still, I think it's still kind of hard to make that argument. And if someone was going to make that argument, I wouldn't be the one to make it. I think just politically, well, practically and also politically, I think the focus should stay on the narco terrorists. That's a winner. It's a winner for Americans, most importantly. And as you already pointed out, it's a political winner because this is the genius of it from a political standpoint is that they're kind of backing Democrats into a corner of being defenders of drug traffickers. And I don't know what polling's been done on this, but I'm sure there's been some polling on it. I just find it hard to believe that there's any American in the country, like actual American, who's waking up at night worried about the fate of narco terrorists. I think we all have the same feeling of we're sick of this. Why are we allowing this scenario where these billion-dollar criminal enterprises are able to kill tens of thousands of Americans? We don't have to allow it. I mean, we're the United States of America. We have the most powerful military on the planet. We don't. This is a choice. We don't have to allow this, and I think that's where almost every American stands.
Yeah, this is, this gets down to a deeper divide that's within MAGA, which is people talk about like the neocons versus the populists, and that's an interesting divide too. But at an even deeper level, there is this debate over what America First means. And there's America First, which has this hard nationalist, bordering on isolationist point of view. And I don't think that's what Trump is. I think Trump has an America First, much more imperialist kind of view, which is different than the neocons, who were kind of liberal imperialists who wanted to sprout up Madisonian democracy everywhere. I think Trump is much more like a big leader of the global hegemon, and I think that's why he wants Greenland. I think that's why he's threatened to invade Canada, and I think that's why he throws his weight around on the world stage for the benefit of Americans, not for abstract ideology, but explicitly for the benefit of Americans. And I think, look, we are the world empire, and that's just a fact, and we've exerted control in our hemisphere for a very long time. And so if Maduro is willing to play ball with us, that's one thing. If he's not, if he's going to work with our enemies, if he's going to ship drugs up into our country, well, then maybe we don't need to tolerate him. And
also, the other thing too is, and I think you alluded to it, that the argument against it. And I said I think most Americans are not up at night worried about narco terrorists, but there are some people who have this libertarian view that, well, the war on drugs failed, and that is a very common view.
Yes,
and
yeah,
but my view of that is like, well, the war on drugs was never tried. I mean, we never actually went to war against drugs, and I think it's kind of like that scene in Breaking Bad where where Mike says, no more half measures. If you're going to do it, it's got like either do it or don't. You can't have a half measure. And when it comes to the quote unquote war on drugs, it strikes me that it's kind of been at most a half measure.
Yeah. Worked a little in the 90s.
Right. Well, again, war on drugs means you got to take the war to the actual drug traffickers.
Well,
that's
the real key, right? I mean, I think that every time we declare a war on a concept, it is bound to fail. Right? If you declare a war on poverty, you can't defeat poverty. If you declare a war on drugs, that's an object.
War on
terrorism, right? Like it has to be a war on the drug traffickers, right? War on drug cartels. Like these are material things that that our military, which is excellent at finding things, breaking them, and destroying them, that they can actually go and do. Like not so good at stopping people's drug habits, really, really good at blowing up narco-terrorist boats in the middle of the Caribbean. And so it seems to me we should, do what our skill set sort of suggests that we should do with the American military, which is, break things. I think that we're really, really good at breaking things, and we're less good at putting things back together, which is why I say about Venezuela that I really hope that there's something waiting in the wings to take over when there is, or if there is, a regime change. I don't think, by the way, my ideology of regime change is not that we have to have democracy everywhere. I think we need a regime that's better for America everywhere that it's possible for there to be a regime. And again, the key word there is possible. And there you have to calculate risk reward, right? What are we risking and what's the upside reward? I think any realist would suggest that there are certain rewards that are not worth the risk, and there are certain risks that are not worth the reward. And so I think that when you look at Venezuela, if you're talking about a very small pinprick military intervention and then Maduro goes bye-bye and suddenly you have a friendlier regime there that's going to denationalize the oil industry, for example, and crack down on the narco traffickers, that sounds pretty good to me. If you're talking about 100,000 troops, it's a completely different story. And the same thing is true about interventions literally anywhere else on Earth. If what you're talking about is one bullet finishing a problem, I'm very much for it. If what you're talking about is 100,000 troops finishing the problem, I'm very much against it.
But then the question, of course, becomes, I mean, you mentioned CIA, activities within Latin America and maybe within Venezuela. The question then becomes, is the CIA, James Bond, Jason Bourne, efficient, ruthless, controls everything, or is the CIA burn after reading? Just every time it tries to do something, it just gets worse and worse, and no one has any idea what's going on. And I no knock. Look, there are very heroic people who have worked for the CIA. CIA has also done very bungled things. Not to be like a huge cop out here. There's evidence for both.
I think let's put it this way: the evidence from the 50s of the former is much better than the evidence today for the former. I'm much closer to the burn after reading version of the CIA today than I would have been prior to the last 25 years of American history, for sure.
All right, so I guess we're not. I do want the oil, though. I want the oil, and I actually love that Trump is open about this.
This actually is one of my favorite things about Trump. I really like that. I like when he was talking about the war in Iraq. Even he's like, it wasn't a war for oil, but maybe it should have been.
Maybe it should have been. You want to deal with affordability? Let's get that oil. How about that? How about that? Why do we give everything away to the whole world? Okay. And all in the spirit of Thanksgiving. Give us your oil. Okay, that's it. That's our show. When are we back on? I think we're doing another one tomorrow. Is that right? No, I can't get you to. Okay, maybe within 2 weeks. Good to see everybody. Everyone else out there. See you next time on Friendly Fire.